What's going on, guys? CultOfMush back at it with my port and performance review of Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. I've been hyping this game up for a while now on PC just because we had the stellar release of Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. This game's release date actually got pushed up, which you almost never see, so I was expecting this to be a really good port, and I'm happy to say that it is. As far as what you have in the settings, it isn't crazy like Mad Max, but there's still a lot of different things you can adjust and a lot of different things to control, so if you want a lot of settings in your game, Metal Gear Solid 5 does have a good amount, more than the norm. And as far as performance goes, I started my testing with the GTX 970. At 1080p, I was getting 60 frames per second locked. It wouldn't go up. I had VSync turned off, but it still stayed at 60 frames per second. I do have a 60 Hz monitor, so I don't know if that played a role in it, but whatever, 60 frames for me. Obviously, since I have a 60 Hz monitor, that's perfectly fine. And at 1080p, the game would hardly ever dip below 60. If it did, it would be to like 58. And by the way, this is completely maxed out. All the GPUs I'm talking about, I ran this game completely maxed out. So at 1080p, the GTX 970 does really well on Metal Gear Solid 5. On 1440p, you can still play the game. Most of the times, you'll get 60 frames per second. On some of the action-packed cutscenes, the game will dip around to 45 to 50 frames per second. So if you want a solid 60 frames per second at 1440p, you're gonna need something better than the 970 if you are looking to max out the game. But still to say, I'll be playing Metal Gear Solid 5 at 1440p on my 970. The game still plays really well. And honestly, had I not been tracking the frame rate the whole time, I probably wouldn't have noticed it that much. Next, I tested out the GTX 950. I only tested out 1080p on this video card since whoever's buying a 950 is probably not playing at 1440p. It was not a locked 60 frames per second. You would get around 50 to 55 frames per second. And even in gameplay, it would dip sometimes to 45 frames per second, but it was still perfectly playable. If you do want a smoother 60 frames per second, I would suggest lowering the settings a little bit. But in my opinion, 45 frames per second on a GPU like the 950, a $150 to $170 GPU, that's perfectly acceptable. And not once while using the GTX 950 did the frame rate go below 30 frames per second, and I know that's what a lot of you budget end gamers kind of see as the threshold. It didn't go below 30 frames per second maxed out, so that's pretty good. But on a mid-level video card like this, if you have a GPU that's around $140 to $170, you probably want to lower the settings a tad bit if you want to get a smooth 60 frames per second at all times. And finally, I tested out an AMD GPU. I tested out the XFX R9 380 4GB model. But while playing on the R9 380 not recording, 60 frames per second most of the times, and in some of the cutscenes, it will go a bit lower during some of the action-packed sequences, but not once did it go below 50 frames per second, so the R9 380 did a really good job at 1080p. If you have a GPU like the R9 380, I wouldn't play the game at 1440p, but if you do have a GPU like the R9 380, you're probably not looking to play at 1440p, so that's just fine. And I was a little nervous testing out the AMD GPU because we all know that Metal Gear Solid 5 came with NVIDIA GPUs, so I didn't know if anything wonky was going on. I didn't know if NVIDIA GPUs were just going to perform better on that fact alone, but I'm happy to say that the game performed really well on the R9 380. So thanks for watching this video, guys. Metal Gear Solid 5 was another great port. Really happy with the final product, and I just have to say this game is freaking amazing. This has potential to edge out Witcher 3 in my Game of the Year contest. I still don't know yet. I gotta finish Metal Gear Solid 5, but so far it's been an absolute blast, and the PC performance definitely helps. So as always, guys, thanks for watching this video. If you have a request for a future video, leave it in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.